Welcome back. It's a Friday, the 21st day of July, 2017. I'm your host, Mark Hall, and it's time to wrap up a week where, by and large, the dog days of summer are upon us, and it kind of means most of the news was updates of things we'd heard before and old lies being recycled. For example, I hope you're sitting down, the Republican Party is unable to do something that they did time after time after time when it didn't make any darn difference, and that was vote to repeal Obamacare. Now that everything's in place, including a Republican president with a pen poised in his hand, where a major rollback of socialism could actually occur, well, you knew all along that the party of socialism light wasn't going to let it happen, didn't you? Yeah, surprise. Again, there are still plenty of alligators in the swamp, and they're on both sides of the aisle. No shortage of other fake news that we kind of heard over and over and over again anyway this week as well. Would you believe there's a war on between Trump and the deep state? They're still trying to destroy his presidency and basically in the process start World War III with Russia. If one big lie gets rejected, there seem to be plenty more on tap. We'll get to a few of those in passing as we have to. But I want to set things up with a whole bunch of stories that fit together in a more appropriate way. From Breitbart and the United Nations, the Clinton Foundation and that particularly evil group, headquartered in New York City, are being curiously tight-lipped, they say, about a meeting that took place last week. Isn't it funny? We hear all about Trump's meetings, even if they're nothing to write home about, between, say, the president and Vladimir Putin at a G20 dinner. It's a scandal, I tell you. How dare they? And so forth. But we don't hear about this. Evidently, pay-for-play and conflicts of interest are just fine, but don't you dare try to avoid World War III. This one, though, was between the Clinton Foundation's head of foreign policy and the UN's Deputy Secretary General. What they call the latest sign of the controversial organization's continued and sometimes surreptitious maneuverings. Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed met Friday with Clinton Foundation's Director of Foreign Policy, Amitabh Desai. The meeting was first noticed by UN blog Inner City Press in a one-line entry concerning Mohammed's schedule. It was all about the implementation of Agenda 2030, and whether you call them communist, fascist, or just socialist, the corporate world state's sustainable development goals, which seem to include making sure that in the name of non-existent man-made global warming, you don't have air conditioning or transportation. So while there are photographs galore of Trump's dinner at the G20, including a brief sit-down with Vladimir Putin, when it comes to this one, the story says, when they were asked further about the meeting, particularly whether the meeting involved the discussion of donations or financial support, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the spokesman's office said they had, say it with me, folks, no further information. And the Clinton Foundation, true to form, did not respond to multiple requests for comment from Breitbart News, and neither, of course, did the UN bother to provide a readout of the meeting to the press. Can you say hypocrisy? So here's today's compare and contrast story. Ask yourself, why isn't this one front page news as opposed to page D27 on every major paper and TV network in the country? The United States Postal Service violated federal law by letting employees do union-funded work for Hillary's campaign and other DNC candidates while on leave from the agency. According to an Office of Special Counsel report, I did see this one on UPI and Fox News, where the OSC determined that the U.S. Postal Service engaged in, quote, systemic violations of the Hatch Act. In other words, folks, they were trying to rig the election. And the Postal Service showed a clear bias favoring the union's 2016 campaign operation, and guess what? You know who.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for. Move along. Move along.
The report said that the Labor 2016 program sought to elect Hillary Clinton and pro-worker candidates across the country. You know, workers of the world unite. Once upon a time, that would have been Russia, booga, 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 citing campaign work like door-to-door canvassing, phone banks, and other get-out-the-vote efforts. When all was said and done, folks, this violation of federal law cost the taxpayers about 8.8 man-years of payment in overtime during the presidential campaign season, while people who took time off were replaced by other workers that got paid time and a half. According to the report, 82% of the criminal activity, the prohibited work on behalf of a presidential candidate to rig an election, took place in 2016 battleground states of Florida, Nevada, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and officials at multiple levels were apparently involved. But if you tend to suspect there won't be any real consequences, much less anybody in the swamp actually losing their job over these violations of federal law in attempts to rig an election, so far, you're right on target. Evidently, it's okay in America if you want to rig an election for the right kind of communists, especially if they have real Russian connections, say via Uranium-1. So let me now wrap up this little bit of compare and contrast with one simple observation. Can you imagine the difference in America today had the fake news press, as we now know them, spent even a tiny fraction of the effort and investigatory enthusiasm on the Obama regime's multiple crimes and acts of treason that they have on the trivialities associated with the dreaded Ruskies that they can't seem to let drop, regardless of the fact that there's no there? From pay to play to national security violations involving secure emails that weren't, to murders of ambassadors, folks, and all kinds of plain old graft corruption, and of course, who could forget a little pedophilia now and then. The level of corruption and criminality that we see today doesn't even move the needle on the Richter scale compared to what we've been used to for year after year and regime after regime. Something really, really stinks here. Case in point, more confirmation of a famous false flag from over a decade and a half ago, and it comes from Baxter Dimitri, Your Newswire, and a source that is on, or was at least, I don't even know if he's still alive, on his deathbed, an 80-year-old retired CIA agent named Malcolm Howard, who has been told that he has not long to live, and he's decided to come clean. He worked for the CIA for 36 years as an operative, and he claims he was tapped by senior CIA agents to work on the project that involved, are you ready, the demolition of World Trade Center Building 7, because he was an engineer, and he had an extensive background in demolition. He was a civil engineer, became an explosives expert, and he talked at some length in this interview about what they called Operation New Century. And it culminated, as you probably have heard, in September of 2001. And essentially what is kind of interesting here is how he describes being literally disgusted with the fact that, at least during those days, people badmouthed the CIA, and they didn't realize these people were doing a job, and they were patriots and so forth. When you're a patriot, he said, you don't question the motivation of the CIA or the White House. You assume it's a greater good, a bigger purpose, and they pick good, loyal people like me, he said, and it breaks my heart to hear this kind of talk. But now on his deathbed, looking back, he says, you know what, something wasn't right. And he went into some length about how for literally a long, long time, they secretly, and it was the only time he had to do this in his career, moved high explosives. He called them military-grade nanothermite composite materials and explosives into the building. They had to get thousands of pounds of explosives, fuses, and ignition mechanisms into the building without causing too much concern. But they did. They succeeded. And on the day that the 9/11, false flag happened, they watched the whole thing on TV. Hours after the two main World Trade Center towers were down, when it was time to pull the World Trade Center Building 7, they watched it happen, he says. They had the whiskey and cigars out. All of a sudden, he said, there was a strange quiet in the room. The assembled agents started to worry if the demolition hadn't gone too smoothly. We watched the tape again and again. We started to get paranoid because it looked like a controlled demolition. We thought, and I'll clean this up, people are going to question this. And then the BBC came out and botched their report. They announced the blowing up of the building 20 minutes before it actually did. We really thought the jig was up, he said. They were afraid people would see through the official narrative. But my comment, hey, never underestimate the power of human stupidity. Big Brother covered it all up, and now this guy has come out and said, you know what, I guess it's time to tell people what really happened. Snopes, true to form, says it's fake news because the whole World Trade Center conspiracy has been completely debunked, but of course, so has Hitler's treason, so what do you expect from them? But it's not like we haven't seen false flag operations getting away with this kind of lie for literally decades now. As an engineer, I watched Oklahoma City, and I know personally the former chief of what's called smart weapons development for the U.S. Air Force, General Benton K. Parton. I interviewed the man on April the 19th for a number of years running, met him, and had discussions with him. And basically, what he makes really clear is anybody with even a high school level understanding of physics can look at the Oklahoma City Murrah building bombing and know that it was a false flag. Literally, it was a physical impossibility that a lone bomber like Tim McVeigh and the little teeny truck bomb he put out front could have done the damage to take out steel-reinforced concrete structural columns. It was contact explosives. The holes didn't even line up, for crying out loud. So, yeah, it doesn't take much education to go through the list of things that have been blamed on the boogeyman of the day and realize the American people have been lied to. So what's funny here is it's just one more case of somebody coming out on their deathbed and saying, oh, you stupid people, you have been sold a bill of goods. Call it one more witness, as if the lie wasn't already transparent enough in itself. We'll follow that up with a sequence of things to make a consistent point. A whole lot of stories that really have to do with mandatory volunteering. Yes, whether you like it or not, pretty soon you're not going to have a choice, but still, you did volunteer, didn't you? Because you probably thought it was the only choice you had anyway. First one comes from UPI, and it says that Visa, one of the we want to be your only cash purveyor major credit cards, is now offering up to $100,000 for restaurants to push you towards the cashless society. Visa's challenging small restaurants, cafes, and food truck stops to stop accepting cash, says the story. Credit card company announced in a news release over the weekend that it is offering $500,000 to 50 eligible U.S.-based eateries if they go 100% cashless. Restaurants signing up can get a $10,000 gift from Visa. You won't be able to have that $10,000 anymore, but they're going to get it as long as it's plastic, to help pay for technology upgrades required to move in the direction of, well, you know what. The businesses are asked to describe, kind of like a contest, what cashless means for them, their employees, and their customers. Try not to use the word Achtung. Quote, at Visa, we believe you can be everywhere you want to be, and I would suggest a few places where you don't want to be, and it should be easy to pay and be paid in more ways than ever, unquote, unless those ways include old-fashioned cash or, better still, silver. They suggest that the options would include a phone card, a wearable, or other device. You know, like biometrics, think some kind of a mark. This, according to Jack Forrestal, Visa's head of Global Merchant Solutions, in a statement, and it added, we have an incredible opportunity to educate merchants and customers alike on the effectiveness of going cashless, unquote. And, of course, the key here is it'll be voluntary until it isn't. Can you remember back to when getting a full-body microwave at an airport was optional? Hasn't been that long ago. Well, volunteering for rape isn't the only thing that Big Brother's transportation sexual abusers have in plan for you. What at first seemed like creeping tiptoe incrementalism, says a piece from Nicholas West via the Activist Post, toward the use of mandatory biometric ID if you'd like to travel, is quickly becoming a warp speed reality. Over the past couple of months, he notes, he's written about several of the disturbing developments at national airports that seem to show an acceleration of the plan, Achtung, to require biometric ID in a variety of ways. Back in May, it was Delta Airlines, first at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, that was going to have automated baggage kiosks for priority customers. That means you bend over on command. And it'll first scan a traveler's passport, then their face in order to match identity to their checked luggage. It was promoted as a pilot program that Delta launched, yeah, sure, they're a partner, aren't they, to seek customer feedback in the hope that they could beta test how it is that they would deal with any objections from those people that still think, hey, I actually once upon a time had rights. And, of course, the idea is to roll this out more completely and more mandatorily in the future. Says your host, who's been watching this process now for years and gotten increasingly more cynical, as you can probably tell. The announcement then was followed by JetBlue stating that they will test, quote, facial and fingerprint recognition technology at 2 U.S. airports to replace boarding passes, building on industry efforts. Yeah, it's a public-private partnership, remember. If the industry doesn't put forth effort, Big Brother tells them they don't get to play. All of this is supposedly about increasing security and easing your passage through the airports, or maybe easing your passage into the New World Order und the marks that will be required. No papers, bitte, for you. All of these stories, though, says Nicholas West, were nothing compared to what followed on June 20th, when U.S. Customs and Border Protection, SIC, if you're an illegal alien, you don't seem to face quite the same scrutiny across the southern borders that you would at an airport. Now they've announced they're integrating government databases with private companies to speed up biometric processing. JetBlue, what choice do they have, is working with U.S. Customs and Border Protection and CETA, an information technology provider for airlines, said Jim Peters, their chief technology officer, in a statement. This is the first integration of biometric authorization by the CBP with an airline and may prove to be a solution that will be quick and easy to roll out across U.S. airports, unquote. And of course, if we get our way, you will not be able to say no to this any more than you can to somebody groping your gonads. It's a plan that's been in the works for 15 years, says the Activist Post, but it's just now coming to fruition.
These things must be done delicately.
Big Brother's man of the moment for the mark. CBP Deputy Executive Assistant Commissioner John Wagner said last Thursday that the goal, and whether they say it or not, we all know what that is, will be accomplished by making use of existing data collection, the latest facial recognition technology, and cloud computing. He acknowledged there might be privacy issues, particularly because the facial recognition technology would capture images of U.S. citizens, probably more than their faces, as part of the overall process, unquote. But since when has the Bill of Rights managed to make any difference? On next to a different form of mandatory volunteering, like, say, in Fresno, where people volunteer to be guinea pigs, whether they know it or not. What could possibly go wrong, asks the organic prepper, Daisy Luther, when Google releases millions of laboratory-made mosquitoes in Fresno? And too bad the idiots doing this, obviously, don't bother to read science fiction. And first of all, she begins, did you even know that Google had a biolab? It does make a kind of Dr. Frankenstein meets Big Brother sense, though, doesn't it? The lab, she writes, is called Verily. And yeah, verily they do, and it does kind of sound biblical, as in, verily I say unto you that we are the purveyors of all that is truth. And verily we say, Google is planning on releasing, via Verily, 20 million mosquitoes after infecting them with a bacteria in their laboratories, whereupon they will be sicked upon the unsuspecting populace of Fresno, California, a city with about 500,000 people. Why? True, they really don't need a reason, but in this case, because Zika. Remember last year's booga 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 Zika scare that prompted Big Brother to spray harmful chemicals all over Florida citizens, and in the process terrifying a whole bunch of pregnant women? Well, apparently the Aedes aegypti mosquito that's said to carry Zika is also prevalent in Fresno, and whether that's true or not, there's only been one confirmed case of Zika in the area, and that woman's partner had been traveling. But in something we've come to see all too often, facts and risks don't matter, because Verily has created a whole bunch of mosquitoes and infected the males with a bacteria called Wolbachia. And when the males mate with females, so we're told, the resulting eggs don't generally hatch. They say can't hatch, but who knows? It's not like the testing is all that exhaustive. By the way, they also did a smaller release of Frankenskitos last year in Fresno. And see, she says, they've already gotten away with it. You didn't know. Nothing bad, at least, has been admitted to have happened yet. So don't worry your pretty little heads about it, because it's not like the people of Fresno are going to have a choice anyway. Theoretically, though, the Wolbachia virus is claimed to be harmless to humans, and the male mosquitoes don't bite anyway, and whether Fresno residents like it or not, and whether they even deserve to know, they'll be the guinea pigs in the release of 1 million or so of these Franken mosquitoes every week over the next 20 weeks. The project has already begun, albeit somewhat quietly, turning the area into a test facility without bothering with the consent of the testees. Trucks are going to be driving through the city, releasing swarms of millions of infested male mosquitoes in Fresno. Says Verily, field studies like this allow us to test our discoveries and technologies in challenging real-world conditions. Oh, and on you, by the way, and to collect the necessary evidence to bring them to a broader scale. Now think about that for a second, folks. Suppose there was a problem. A, do you think they're going to admit it? And B, I kind of wonder if that will really slow them down anyway. We're excited, says Verily, to take the first step in that journey today by bringing these technologies to the field. And I'll say it again, whether you really volunteered for it or not. Right, Stacey Luther? Yeah, there could be something that would go wrong. Just off the top of my head, here are some of them. What if the mosquitoes were sorted incorrectly? Do you really think that out of 20 million mosquitoes, nary a biting female would get through the sorting process? What if the virus Wolbachia mutates? Something that's not supposedly harmful now could certainly morph into something far worse than Zika, which isn't saying much because a number of scientists have said the whole thing was way overblown, particularly the supposed link between Zika and infant encephalopathy. Ask yourself how many of those kids are going to suffer brain damage from mandatory vaccinations anyway. And what if scientists come to believe that this precedent gives them permission to conduct other field studies of other things? Suggests Luther. Who are we kidding, folks? The precedent has been set. And blankety blank and well, the die has already been cast. Apparently, writes Stacey Luther, they already believe they don't require anybody's permission to turn neighborhoods into test facilities. And it would appear they don't even give too much consideration to these things, or if they do, they're really not the ones taking the real risks anyway, are they? And regardless, the point remains that the city of Fresno is being turned into a controlled environment for Big Brother's Verily without bothering with the consent of the guinea pigs. Not the first time. And where do we go after Franken mosquitoes? How about Terminator robots? You're not going to have a choice about that either. This one comes via Zero Hedge and Joseph Jankowski of PlanetFreeWill.com. It's entitled, their headline, Elon Musk's Worst Nightmare. The Russian company that makes the Kalashnikov AK-47 is now building a fully automated killer robot. The debate about warfare of the future and, of course, the Terminator series is truly beginning to take shape, he writes. Predator drone-style combat machines are just the tip of the iceberg for what's already coming down the line when it comes to lethal weaponry. Some people are worried that when robots call the shots, things could, who could possibly imagine this, get a little out of hand. Recently, there's even been debate at the UN, of all places, about killer robots, with a number of prominent scientists, researchers, and human rights organizations all warning that this type of technology, they call it lethal tech, because it divorces the need for any human control, could, do you think, result in a slew of unintended consequences to the detriment of humanity. A study conducted by the University of British Columbia shows that this type of Terminator-like weaponry isn't sitting well with the general public, and an overwhelming majority of people, regardless of their country of origin or culture, want a complete ban placed on any further development of autonomous killer robot systems of war. But despite the risks, and you probably already knew this, didn't you, based on what we've talked about just today, that ain't even slowing them down. Especially when it can be done with other people's money. And if there do turn out to be negative consequences, by the time it's obvious, it'll be too late to do anything about it anyway, kind of like Fukushima. Kalashnikov, maker of the iconic AK-47 rifle, is one of the manufacturers now bringing lethal automation and robotics into the current day. It's building an entire range of products based on neural networks, including a fully automated combat module that can identify and shoot at its own targets. And isn't it kind of funny, folks, that the same people that ultimately wouldn't trust you with such a rifle do trust the T-1000 Terminator robot? Said TASS, the Kalashnikov combat module consists of a gun connected to a console that constantly crunches image data to identify targets and make decisions. And I gotta say it, I do wonder if they'll have access to CETA's passenger facial recognition database via cloud technology. The bottom line, suggests this story, is that war is a racket, and when there's lots of money to be made, as we've already seen in so many ways today, whether it's effective or not, whether it's voluntary or not, and whether the people who aren't going to get to make the choice are taking unseemly risks or not, people who get to spend other people's money to play God tend to not have as much interest in the consequences as those who are the guinea pigs. The rest of us, though, had better be paying attention and learning to tell the difference. Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for joining us this week, and may Yahuwah bless you and yours.